to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth. Well, welcome to Life on Earth with Robert Nasir, my better half, a little under the weather. She may be sitting this one out. You may just get me, but we are well prepared, ready to go. Good stuff for you. And I am glad you are here. Hello, you good people. This is Life on Earth. Now, here's a correction for you. Show title based on Ayn Rand's West Point speech, Philosophy Who Needs It. In that speech, she said, formally, I call my philosophy objectivism, but informally, I call it a philosophy for living on Earth, hence the name of this show. But I mentioned before, that was from her 1976 talk, and I just got corrected. Apparently, that talk was 1974. You know, I'm thinking I conflated U.S. military, West Point. It must have been 1976, the bicentennial. It's kind of sad that I was around that long ago that I still think of the bicentennial as this big patriotic year when everything was red, white, and blue. It was very cool at the time. Apologies for that correction, but welcome to Life on Earth. Now, on Tuesday, so this would be 2 days ago, I'm on the social media, the Facebooks, you know, the kids used to use that. I guess it's all old people now. And I posted this post. This great post. Some of you may have seen it before, especially if you're a musician. Chick Corea's, what was it? Cheap but good advice for musicians. So it's an old meme. It's like a typewritten sheet of paper that got photographed, gets passed around. And it's got this great advice for musicians. But what I put in the post was, you know what? This is great advice for life. You know, in this sense, we're all musicians. You, whether you are or not, you are a musician. Because these are great life skills. You know, you read this list without reference to music. You know, he writes things like play only what you hear. Don't let your fingers and your limbs wander. Place them intentionally. This is great advice for a jazz musician, but, you know, apply it to life. Do only the things you actually value. Don't just fill your time. Be intentional. Do not waste time. Don't worry about what others think. Trust your judgment. Give others the same attention and respect that you expect. This is my interpretation of these great rules for musicians. I thought that was pretty cool. That was a cool post. If you haven't seen that post, go to facebook.com/Robert Nasir. That post is there. But one of the responses I got, listening, you know who you are. One of the responses I got was, well, I think you're being far too generous in interpreting these suggestions. They are mostly so vague as to be completely meaningless to anyone who doesn't already understand the principles they are attempting incoherently to describe. And then he went on and went into some detail bashing this poor post, and then said, these are generally about as helpful as a fortune cookie. To which I responded, awesome. I love a good fortune cookie. Heck, I've done whole episodes on aphorisms. This conversation went on and on. So if you look at that post, you can see where it went to. Ultimately, I said, I'll explain why also later, that we are all not just musicians, we are all dancers. A quick important update, by the way, in that regard, I now have a Substack, and I will be pointing you to that. Now, before I get into aphorisms, first of all, I want to define my terms. This is going to be so cool and extremely valuable. A film recommendation to get us into the topic. If you have not yet seen Audrey Tautou in Amelie, you must see this film. Oh, we got some real glare there from the studio lights. This is a new copy. I should have brought out the old one. Of course, I have multiple DVDs of this fantastic film. If you haven't seen Amelie yet, make it happen. It's great. Oh, I got people in the chat saying, where's Amy? Amy is a little under the weather. She's probably not going to make it onto today's show. She's doing what she's got to do to not be under the weather. Oh, good. My producer found my Substack. He's already linked to it in the chat. Thank you for that. But yes, Amy is, you know, I'm sure she's listening in. She's watching the show, but not here at the moment. You're going to have to settle for me. I will do my best to do two people's jobs, including keeping one eye on the chat. But yes, she's a little, the weather's up there and she's down here. She is under the weather. So Film Amelie. You've got to see the film Amelie. But there's a sequence in the film in which Amelie's coworker, Gina, is screening a potential love interest of Amelie. And how is she going to screen this guy and make sure that he's worthy to be with her? What she does is she asks him to complete a series of sentences, sayings. She calls them proverbs, like a rolling stone, gathers no moss, or I can't remember all of the other ones, but we're going to do a bunch of these. But I love this idea that you can tell a person's character by their ability to complete proverbs. Well, that sounds kind of silly, right? But aphorisms, to me, are the fast food of philosophy. Which is why I couldn't resist calling the show Fast Food Philosophy. And yes, I spelled it with 3 F's on purpose because it's philosophy light. But it has an enormous role to play, which we will get into. So what is an aphorism? Let's start with that. Aphorisms are like Catholic girls. Oh no, that's a joke. An aphorism is a concise, terse, laconic, or memorable expression of a general truth or principle. Okay, I'm good with that definition. Aphorism is often handed down by tradition from generation to generation. The concept is distinct from an adage, brokered, epigram, or maxim. I think a lot of aphorisms are maxims. So we're going to cover that. But yes, aphorisms are like Catholic girls. You got to know that old joke, right? Aphorisms are like Catholic girls. They only go so far. You want to go all the way, you need philosophy. But aphorisms are powerful stuff. And that Chick Corea's cheap but good advice for musicians. Play to make the other musicians sound good. Play things that will make the overall music sound good. Apply that to business. You play to make the business successful, and that's going to make you successful. Create space. Never beat or pound your instrument. Play it easily and gracefully. This is how to make great music and how to make great life. And I could believe that somebody came along and said, oh, that's vapid, that's empty. Now, one of the things about aphorisms, unless you wrote them, and yes, I've got a few that I wrote that I'll share, but unless you wrote them, yes, they're not going to be philosophy, and they're not always going to be bulletproof, ironclad, 100% accurate. And that brings me to a topic I've got to bring up, because this came up on Lee Pearson's show, came up on a couple shows recently, and people have very mixed reactions about Jordan Peterson. Well, if we're talking about aphorisms, some of his 12 rules for life definitely qualify as aphorisms, right? Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Well, that's a good rule. I don't know if it really counts as an aphorism, but treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Ooh, that's a good one. That reminds me of something that I have said before. You deserve the spotlight at least every now and then, so stand on the table. You are enough. These are not just me saying these things, but yes, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. The great Quent Cordair, objectivist artist, objectivist author. In fact, if you go to my show notes, you'll see a link to his author page on Amazon.com. Everything listed is worth purchasing and reading. But the great Quent Cordair once said, famously, one doesn't deserve to be one's own toughest critic without also being one's most devoted fan. I'll say that again. One doesn't deserve to be one's own toughest critic without also being one's own most devoted fan. Quent Cordair, or as Jordan Peterson says, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. You should be at least as good to yourself as you are to everybody else. That's my version of that. I love a good aphorism because they encapsulate wisdom, because they take philosophy, things you already know, and give you a pocket version of that to remind yourself during those times when you've forgotten or when you are acting against your own best wisdom. So the Jordan Peterson version, it's a mix, but it's mostly good. And that's why there are objectivists and normies, I don't know what the right word, non-O's would be, who love this stuff. Even though if you read the book, you'll be like, yeah, I don't agree with that. Oh, yeah, I don't agree with that. Oh, don't agree with that. But how can you go wrong with make friends with people who want the best for you? I've been talking online recently about good intent, goodwill, and I have had people say to me, that doesn't matter. All that matters is their adherence to the facts of reality. Intentions don't matter. I could not possibly disagree more strongly than that. And I think that requirement that you deal with people of good intent, of goodwill, that you find those people and embrace them is consistent with this idea of make friends with people who want the best for you. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who someone else is today. Well, the Roosevelts, and there's arguments over whether Teddy or Franklin or Eleanor said it, but one of them said, comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. I'm telling you, no matter what you're doing out there, unless you're the best in the world, the GOAT, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, somebody out there is better at whatever it is you're trying to do than you are. Certainly somebody out there is better at everything I'm trying to do than I am. But comparison is the thief of joy. The question isn't, are you the greatest there ever was? The question is, are you the greatest you ever were? Are you as good as you want to be? Yes. Or as Peterson says, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. A bunch of good ones in there, a bunch of so-so ones in there, like tell the truth or at least don't lie. That's a mess. That's totally a mess. And this is where you need philosophy to know, well, here is when honesty requires that I don't tell, for example, the bank robber or the kidnapper the truth. So that's unfortunate. But again, these are just rules for life. So when are they valuable? Well, they're valuable when your philosophy is already bulletproof. But if you've got a bulletproof philosophy, why do you need this stuff? Well, because you don't read objectivism and get advice like, do not bother children when they are skateboarding. Oh, I guess there's independence and there's letting people think for themselves, be first-handed. But yeah, do not bother children when they are skateboarding. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. I don't need permission to have Jordan Peterson to tell me to pet a cat when I see one in the street. No, but you might need that reminder. You know, it's Ferris Bueller's advice about life. Last line in the movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. How many people do that? Where did the expression stop and smell the roses come from? It's from people who never stop and never smell the roses. I love a good aphorism. So I recommend that you know your aphorisms, that you have a list of your favorite aphorisms. Sorry, I hit the cough button there. And that you know that you have them in your pocket. I call them pocket philosophy precisely because you should know your aphorisms well enough that when you need them, you can pull them out of your pocket. And even when you don't need them, but a bit of inspiration will do you some good, they're there. And if somebody came up to you and said, well, what are your proverbs? What are your sayings? What are your aphorisms? You would know what they are. And hello, Stephanie, I see you there in the chat. Speaking of the chat, it's a little light because I don't have Amy with me today. And I know when Amy is here, that always brings on more and more chat action. So please feel free, ask any questions, say anything you like in the chat. Ideally is a super chat to support the Ayn Rand Center UK. If you're not super chatting, at least make sure you're a member by going to aynrandcenter.co.uk and hitting member. Link will be in the chat there as well, just in case you haven't already signed up. It's only £9.99 a month, and you're silver. You can put in a little more, and then I could say you're golden. There are 4 different levels. Sign up for whatever you can afford to support this outstanding organization that has the good taste to make me and my missing partner today members of the channel. What are your aphorisms? So what I want to see in the chat is, have you got any? Have you got any sayings you live by? Any aphorisms you believe? Anything that is important to you? And these can come from objectivism. Although a lot of objectivism is more hard to philosophy or serious philosophy than aphorisms. But Ayn Rand has great definitions that serve as aphorisms. For example, honor. You know, objectivists don't talk about honor and loyalty and concepts like that enough, courage and confidence. Ayn Rand does talk about those things. Ayn Rand says honor is self-esteem made visible in action. Honor is self-esteem made visible in action. Remember, Ayn Rand's idea of pride is that pride is a virtue. It's not synonymous with self-esteem, but pride is actually acting as your own highest value and consistent with your own beliefs and your own goals, living up to what you want out of life, living up to your philosophy. Pride is a virtue, not a value. Self-esteem is the value. I know to a lot of people they're synonymous. I love that Ayn Rand makes that distinction. When you go to work, do you work with pride? Do you execute with pride? So Ayn Rand says honor is self-esteem made visible in action. Outstanding. Now, just the point that we don't necessarily need to hammer on Jordan Peterson for being inconsistent. I'm going to go to another hero. Jordan Peterson's a hero. I'm a little more critical of him than that. But what about Poor Richard? Poor Richard, yes. The older folks know. Anybody who had a decent education knows. Poor Richard, Benjamin Franklin, kept an almanac, published an almanac, and all the things you put in an almanac, including advice for farmers and the expected changes in the weather and the seasons and all that stuff. But he filled Poor Richard's almanac with proverbs, with aphorisms. And some of them are famous. 3 may keep a secret if 2 of them are dead, which is why I never keep secrets. Also, Mark Twain reminds us that if you never tell a lie, you don't have to remember anything. Same thing with secrets. I never keep secrets because I can never remember to keep secrets. Never ask me when you see me, hey, Robert, can you keep a secret? The answer is always going to be, no, sorry, I can't. Poor Richard's almanac, lost time is never found again. I'm telling you, if you're watching this episode right now and it's a waste of time to you, turn it off and go do something more valuable. Now I'm going to make sure it is valuable to you, but if you're doing things where time is slipping away, Poor Richard, Benjamin Franklin reminds us, lost time is never found again. Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff that life is made of. Or as Chris Squire of the band Yes sings, any day that you waste is one more that you've lost. Love that from Poor Richard's Almanac. But he also says things like, search others for their virtues, thyself for thy vices. Well, that's good advice in the sense of ownership and action, because there's not much you can do about other people's vices. And there's little you need to do about your own virtues. So improve yourself. Don't worry too much about what everybody else is doing. But that's a mixed case, because it does matter if other people have vices. You got to decide whether you want to deal with them. It's not so much about criticizing them as just determining what to do about them. Speak little, do much. Another case where take action, don't just talk about stuff, but it depends on how you interpret it. I do like this. If thou would not be forgotten as soon as you are dead and rotten, either write things worth reading or do things worth writing. Very good. The way to see by faith is to shut the eye of reason. Or a related one, in the affairs of this world, men are saved not by faith, but by the lack of it. Oh, so much a troublemaker. Love that from Benjamin Franklin. So again, know your aphorisms. Know what it is that you live by, what your pocket philosophy is. Know your philosophy. Know your explicit philosophy. We had an Ayn Rand trivia contest. I won that contest. I think you should win that contest. Everybody should know this stuff inside out. But know your pocket philosophy. Know your running program, and be able to pull these things out when you need them. One of my greatest sayings, and I don't even know if I made this up or if I heard this, but if you want to live well, you have to live well. Tongue twister, supposedly clever. I think it's clever, but mostly just reminds you, if you want to live well, you actually have to go out and live well. If you want to achieve success, if you want to achieve wealth, you're going to have to get out there and do the things that make that happen. Okay, we all know that. But when I say to myself, when I remind myself, if I'm feeling unambitious, well, If you want to live well, you have to live well. That does it for me. Just like if you want what you've never had, this is something for those of you who are thinking, I'd like to change things up. If you want what you've never had, you must do what you've never done. Ooh, that one's tough. Yesterday, today was tomorrow, and tomorrow, today will be yesterday. Yesterday, today was tomorrow. Okay. That means that whatever happened yesterday is responsible for where I'm at today. If it's going well, I did that yesterday, but today will be yesterday. And that means I'd better do what I've got to do today to make tomorrow outstanding. Yesterday, today was tomorrow, and tomorrow, today will be yesterday. And then there are some controversial ones, and I have to cover these. I cannot resist this. Although let me take a quick look at the chat because some of these are a little longer and I missed skimming them. Outside of the 7 virtues, a lot of objectivists overlook lesser virtues. There's probably some truth to that. Yeah, I've certainly seen that in some folks. I'd be happy if objectivists would consistently apply the 7 virtues, but yes, absolutely. Courage and confidence and honor and loyalty, and there are 1,000 other virtues besides rationality and productiveness and honesty and integrity and pride and justice. Did I say productiveness? That's the one I always leave out, and it's ironic because it's one of my favorites, if there can be favorites in such a thing. And I've got some controversial ones, and I got to get into the controversial ones, and I want to hear you beat me up on these if you disagree. Treat others not as they deserve to be treated, but as you deserve to treat them. I've done whole posts on this, and we've discussed it on my other show. Treat others not as they deserve to be treated, but as you deserve to treat them. Yes, I've taken some flack for that one, but I absolutely believe that it's true. You are not the world's policeman, and you do not have an obligation to sacrifice your time, your energy, righting every wrong that's ever been done to you. You're not the world's policeman, and it is an act of self-sacrifice to try to exact justice on everybody who's ever wronged you. You could spend the rest of your life just fighting the IRS and still not achieve justice in that regard. No, treat others not as they deserve to be treated, but as you deserve to treat them. Now, sometimes it amounts to the same thing. There are certainly people that I have exacted justice upon. But I'll tell you this, there are a lot of people who have wronged me, and the worst thing I can do to them, the cruelest thing I can do to them, the biggest act of vengeance I have enacted upon them, people who have done me wrong, is put them in my rearview mirror and watch them fade away into the distance, because they don't get me anymore after that. Oh man, that's punishment. So yes, one more on the cough button here. Man, maybe I'm getting whatever's got Amy feeling down too. Incidentally, since Apollos mentions do unto others, I have to mention that the golden rule is an aphorism. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I'm telling you, the golden rule for most of us, if we're honest and think about it for a minute, the golden rule would land most of us in jail. And I won't say any more than that. You think about that one for a second. If you do unto others as you would have them do unto you, well, Apollo, you think about the first time a pretty girl walks by, apply the golden rule and tell me that you managed to stay out of prison. No, the golden rule is not great advice. But like all aphorisms, it depends on how you take it, how you read it. Yes. The value of an aphorism depends on your underlying philosophy. It's one of the problems with somebody like Jordan Peterson, and one of the reasons why so many people despise him is because the underlying philosophy is such a mishmash. It's a combination of determinism and malevolence, but the rules still stand, and there's so much good advice there that you are not getting from anybody else. So you pick and choose, kind of like Christians do with the Bible. You pick out the parts that work, you leave the rest behind. Will it ever be the case that there will be so many good bits of wisdom, not just philosophy, but wisdom by objectivists, that we can throw out everything everybody else says because we'll have everything covered? Maybe someday. I just don't have the feeling that we are there yet. For example, Memento Mori. I think most of us know Memento Mori. Remember that you are mortal. Remember that someday you are going to die. Again, any day that you waste is one more that you've lost. And it's not the fact that you're going to die and you'll be saying, oh, what a shame I'm dead. You won't be around. You won't care. So the point is your time is finite. And your time at any given age is finite. Your time at any given level of health is finite. We mentioned last week that you should always remember to take photographs of yourself. At the time we were talking about naughty photographs and videos, but take photographs of yourself now. And you may think, but I don't look that good now. I wish I looked better. I'm telling you, 10 years from now, you will look at the photographs you took today and you won't believe how good you looked 10 years ago. Think about any period in your life past your teen years or maybe your 20s. And for most people, that's absolutely true. Take photographs of yourself now. You apply that however you like. But yes, Memento Mori. Remember, someday, well, everything is finite, and so am I. So are you. Failing to plan is planning to fail. That sounds a little harsh, but it is an aphorism. Take it for what it's worth. Failing to plan is planning to fail. I especially see high IQ types that really need this advice. I know people who think, I don't have to write stuff down. I don't have to make a plan. I know what to do and I can go out and do it. I can juggle those 10 to-dos that I've got today without doing any planning. What I haven't met is somebody who is so high IQ that they can actually do that better than if they had just written things down. So failing to plan is planning to fail. These are some of the aphorisms that I live by. Stealing this one from Mae West, you only live once, but if you live right, once is enough. That goes along with Memento Mori. You only live once, but if you live right, once is enough. And, you know, my top aphorism, the number one lesson that I would hope people get from listening to the things that I do or from reading my brand new Substack, values are primary. And what I mean when I say values are primary, and some of you already know what I mean by that, is you're here to live a life. You got to fight evil sometimes. You got to protect yourself against disvalues, against people who would do you wrong, against government overreach, against war and famine and economic collapse and all the terrible things that we need to remediate against. But you're not here for that. You're here to live a life. You know, going back to Quentin Linda Cordair, and incidentally, Cordair.com is also in my show notes. You should be there looking at the art, buying it if it's in your budget. If it's not in your budget, sign up for their once a month club. You can put money aside every month. The Cordair has fought the mandates in California, Napa. And the expression they used at the time when they opened up Quentin Cordair Fine Art, despite the mandates, was, not dying is not living. The way I put it is, living is more than just not dying. So yes, values are primary. You are here to live a life. Now, how much time should you spend fighting evil? How much of your time and energy? What percentage of your time out of 100% should you spend arguing? I mean, unless you're enjoying arguing and learning something, fighting, complaining, and standing out in the street with picket signs and traveling to the White House to protest Earth Day or the forcible return of Elian Gonzalez to Cuba, or going to Chicago to engage in the free market protests. Or, incidentally, these are all things that I have done. I've stood on the side of Plymouth Road in Michigan protesting Obamacare. I've gone to the Tea Party rallies. I've done all the things, and I'm not done. I'm going to do more of that. But how much of your time and your energy are you spending fighting evil? Daniel's got the spoiler right there. He knows my show, 97.3. My personal formula is 97.3. 97% of my time I am spending creating, producing, celebrating, dancing, playing music, romancing my wife, doing all of the things that make life worth living. And 3% of my time, I sit down and I make sure all of my insurance is up to date and my security cameras on my housework, and I'm contributing to organizations who are fighting the kind of battles that I think need to be fought, and all of that stuff. That might be an exaggeration. I'm not sure. I've never measured it. More a sense of 97.3 is about what I live. It's about what's right now. If you're a cop, if you're in the military, if you're somebody whose passion is fighting evil, go for it. I'm not saying 97.3 is the right number. All I'm saying is know in advance, here's what I'm shooting for. This is what I want, and I'm going to live it. Because values are primary. You are here to live a life, not just to keep people from messing with your life. You got to do some of that, maybe 3%, but you are here to live a life. So my number one aphorism is values are primary. Threats to your values must be dealt with, then let go of. You aren't here to not die. You are here to live. Of course, I could do this all day, but the point is know your pocket philosophy, know your aphorisms. And when you see things like Chick Corea's cheap but good advice for musicians, prune it. It may be a rose bush and there may even be some thorns there, but there's good stuff. And as a musician, of course, it was valuable to me as a musician. You musicians out there, see, if I had my co-host, I wouldn't be stumbling over words because she'd be talking too. You musicians out there can follow this advice. One of the mistakes I make as a total amateur musician is when I am improvising, or even when I'm not improvising, I play what I know. I play what I know how to play, rather than what I would like to hear. Now that's harder. It's harder when you're playing a guitar solo to think, what would I like to hear, and not, oh, what do I know how to play that I know sounds pretty good? One of the masters of that was George Benson. When he would play his guitar solos, he would often be on the microphone and singing along with what he was playing on the guitar, because he knew what he wanted to hear. He wanted to hear the melody he was singing, and he knew how to play it on the guitar and make that come out. Love that. Love that. And I need a little bit more of that as an amateur musician before I will ever be a professional musician, which I still on some level want to be when I grow up. So my takeaways, and again, this is a very light episode, but I think it's really, really important. My takeaways are aphorisms are witty sayings, clever and memorable bits of wisdom. Think Stoicism. Now you should read Aaron Smith's outstanding critiques of the philosophy of Stoicism, because he will help you avoid all of the pitfalls when you go to read the Meditations, when you go to read Marcus Aurelius or Cicero. But when you go into the Meditations, you will find advice you're not going to find in Objectivism, valuable advice that just simply hasn't been addressed yet in the philosophy. Read Aaron Smith first, because again, he'll help you avoid the pitfalls of bad philosophy. But then read Marcus Aurelius for the aphorisms, for the wisdom, for the advice. You can do the same thing with the I Ching. You can do the same thing with the Art of War. If your philosophy is bulletproof, if you're an objectivist, if you're well-studied, there's more you need then to go out there and live a good life. And you can find it in these places, even if it's just Chick Corea's advice, or reading Jordan Peterson, or reading Poor Richard's Almanac, or watching a film like Amelie. The wisdom is out there. But again, aphorisms are just witty sayings, clever and memorable wits of wisdom. 2, aphorisms don't replace philosophy. Philosophically, they're only as good as the philosophy of the person interpreting and deploying them. Use this stuff. And number 3, like any proposition, instruction, suggestion, rule, motto, proverb, or law, aphorisms are great for remembering and applying important truths and maxims. So I've linked to my post on aphorisms, and I've included links in the show notes to every one of these resources. One of the great things about Jordan Peterson's book is you don't have to read it because there's a lot of evolutionary psychology and malevolence underneath it all. The 12 rules are publicly available. They're on the Wikipedia page. The link is in the show notes. The producer in the chat says, the best aphorism? Aphorisms don't replace philosophy. That's funny because it is true. It doesn't really stand alone, though. It doesn't do you much good other than to remind you, this stuff does you only so much good. Well, that's why I had to make a Catholic girls joke. Aphorisms are like Catholic girls. They only go so far. I don't know that joke really holds anymore. That when I was young, back in high school, it was, well, let's just say some of the guys preferred to date the Jewish girls because they did not have that limitation. Billy Joel fans know the song "Only the Good Die Young." That's all I'm going to say about that. But that is funny. So, know your aphorisms, know your pocket philosophy, steal as much as you want from Jordan Peterson, from Poor Richard, from Chick Corea, from me, from your friends, from The Art of War, from the I Ching, and find a whole mess of it, a whole bunch of good stuff in, of course, Ayn Rand's writing. And, luck is for the ill-prepared, and if you want what you've never had, you must do what you've never done. I know people who say this stuff is light, philosophy light, and in a way it is, but I also know people who, if they knew these basic bits of wisdom and lived by them, their lives would be not a little better, but massively better than they are. And that's all I've got for today. I'm sure we would have taken twice as long if Amy had added her insights. A little under the weather today, so we're missing her. I am going to go over to Clubhouse and wrap up the session there, but thank you for joining me. Next week, I'm sure Amy will be back. You'll get the twofer, both of us, which is good because that's what you're paying for. In the meantime, thank you for that, and we will see you on Clubhouse.